Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We are from Group 8. We will present the result of our discussion regarding interactive speech. Here, Laila Tamimi as the first presenter and Anis Nurfitriani as the second presenter, and the last, I'm Rizky Devita Amalia as the last presenter. Okay. The first material will be delivered by Laila Tumimi.
First, interactive speech turn-taking. From the CA literature, most prominently the seminal paper, we know that gaps and overlaps between two turns in conversation are minimized, so that most of them are small. Subsequent quantitative studies have indeed shown that the most frequent or modal gap duration is about 200 milliseconds and is similarly short in different languages. We can distinguish at least three different but possibly overlapping types of cognitive process related to turn-taking. First, the upcoming speaker has to understand the current turn well enough to know what type of next turn is relevant if one is, which minimally means recognizing or projecting the action that is performed by the incoming turn. Second, the upcoming speaker needs to start planning an appropriate next turn of the appropriate action type. Third, she needs to make sure that the articulation of her turn occurs at the right time, that is, without too much overlap or too much of a gap, by either projecting or recognizing the imminent end of a TZU. 1.1 Simultaneous talk and interruption. Fluency is an important construct in interpretation quality assessment in both professional and educational settings and for different stakeholders. The importance of fluency is also testified by the fact that it forms part of numerous rating scales in interpreting tests. It has been operational by testing specialists in the form of assessment rubrics and scholar descriptors in provisional certification testing. In skill-based, rather mediate assessment of interpreting fluency, and fundamental assumption is that the more frequently these features are present in an interpreted rendition, the less fluent the delivery is perceived to be by human readers. In other words, frequent premenopause interpretation and repairs indicate an absence of fluency, whereas further and more sustained speech production consists with a perception of fluency. Readers are believed to be able to discern and respond to a diverse array of temporal features, presumably underlying in the present fluency.
Okay, the next material, Speech formulated on the spot. The present paper is limited to the production of isolated prosodic words. The theory in outline is first processing stage. The flow diagram presented in Figure 1 shows the theory in outline. The production of words is conceived as a state process leading from conceptual preparation to the initiation or articulation. Each stage produces its own characteristic output representation. These are respectively lexical concept, lemmas, morpheme, phonological words, and phonetic gestural scores. The second, conceptual preparation. The process leading up to the activation of a lexical concept is called conceptual preparation. However, there are many roads to Rome. In everyday language use, a lexical concept is often estimated as part of a large message that captures the speaker's communicative intention. The third, lexical selection. Lexical selection is retrieving a word, or more specifically a lemma, from the mental lexicon given a lexical concept to be expressed. In normal speech, we retrieve some 2 or 3 words per second from a lexicon that contains tens of thousands of items. This speed process is surprisingly robust. Errors of lexical selection occur in the 1 for 1,000 range. And next, poses and gestures. Miss Neil, 1985, urges that gesture and speech are parts of the same physiological structure and share a computational taste. The argument is based on the very close temporal, semantic, pragmatic, pathological, and development parallel between speech and referential and discourse-oriented gesture. It is important at the outset to point out that Miss Neil employs a very broad concept of gesture. Miss Neil's position, of course, contrasts sharply with the popular body language view of gesture, in which gesture and other bodily movements are interpreted as forming a quite separate channel of communication with quite different function. There is a growing body of literature on the instrument comprehension of human gesture. Predominantly, research efforts are clustered around 2 kinds of gesture: manipulative and semaphoric. Manipulative gesture, as thus whose intended purpose is to control some entity by applying a time relationship between the actual movement of the gesturing hand-arm with the entity being manipulated. Semaphoric gesture to be any gesturing system that employs a stylized dictionary of static or dynamic hand or arm gesture. And next, gesture and manipulation are clearly different entities, sharing between them possibly only the picture that both might elicit the same body parts. A system that divided the gesture analysis process into 2 phases: picture analysis and interpretation. Next, the gestures were annotated using the Hamburg notation system for such language. This class of gesture, broadly termed daisy or pointing gesture, has some of the flavor of manipulation in its capacity of immediate spatial reference. And gesture and speech are not subservient to each other, as though one word and afterthought on to enrich or augment the other. Gestures can be classified based on their form, iconic, symbolic, and emblems, and gesture.
Okay, next, English conversation by Chinese speakers, disfluencies, and discourse makers. Chinese speakers English used in intercultural communication is legitimate in its own right rather than as erroneous as a stigmatized learner variety. Borrowing said Larver's reconceptualization of variety and community. I argue that CHELF represents Chinese speakers' adaptation and appropriation of English to suit their purpose for communication in lingua franca encounters. CHELF is not defined on the basis of a geographically confined boundary, but is related to the speakers who are from mainland China and who indicate their sense of belonging to the group in which they have their shared Chinese language and culture for them to draw on. Chinese speakers have some variation in English which mirror the findings in ELF research. Although further research will be helpful to identify the extent to which CHELF users have shared repertoire with ELF users from other L1 backgrounds. Chinese speakers' variation in English drawn from previous research might suggest the potential of CHELF users' common ground with ELF users from other L1 backgrounds. Okay, next, structure and coherence in conversation. Coherence is a correspondence or a congruity arising from some principle common to a sequence. In short, coherence is what makes a sequence of words or clauses or sentences sensible. It ties the elements of the sequence together. Technically, a syllogism is a discourse. It is composed of sentences in the context of other sentences, and these are related to the one another. The relationship happens to be formal entailment in a closed system, but it is a relationship non-sales. Halliday and Hassan, 1976, conclude that cohesion is typically achieved via the application of certain cohesion mechanisms. A few of these include the first recurrence is the use of an expression later in an interaction. The second, purpose in the restatement of the same content later in the interaction. The third, adjacency. Pairs are two utterance units that imply one another. The fourth, anaphora is when some prior content is activated by a proform. Typically, a pronoun refers to a previous noun phrase. And the last, cataphora is the opposite of anaphora. Here, a proform occurs before the semantically full expression. Okay, maybe enough. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.